Good day everyone. For today's video, I am going to report a research article titled Multiculturalism in Video Game Studies, an inquiry into the current research and perspective for study by Agniezka, Klis-Brodowska. Well, this is just a sort of summarization, and this is purely based on my comprehension upon reading the article. So next is we have its abstract. The following chapter surveys a number of ways in which video games may be studied from the perspective of multiculturalism in a way that benefits both video game studies and studies in multiculturalism. It familiarizes the reader with an existing model for studying video games with cultural diversity in mind and provides a brief review of two important sources that provide information on the current state of video game research: the Routledge Companion to Video Game Studies and the selection of text from Digress Digital Library. In doing so, it strives to highlight both the diversity of perspectives already taken on the multicultural aspect of game and their functioning in culture and the pressing need for further research. Next is we have the introduction. No matter whether they are labeled a serious indie or commercial, games may and do raise serious questions that of multiculturalism is included. The major idea behind choosing the sources was to just juxtapose more comprehensive accounts with individual texts of a narrower focus, in order to provide a brief glance at both the general and the particular. Still, the scope of materials can be certainly extended by listing other valuable, perhaps more canonical resources and perspectives. As a result, this article may serve as a possible vantage point for further discussion. While it devotes much attention to game studies, the insights into games research it provides makes it clear that video games constitute a fruitful field of interest for multiculturalism as well. Next is video games as multicultural phenomena and video game studies. Multiculturalism infuses video games on multiple levels, by no means restricted to their visual contents. In the following section, the basic focus on how cultural contexts impact both internal and external environment, and how games as cultural artifacts generate spaces for further influence. In other words, we shall adopt the view that games are inescapably, indisputably culture, according to Salin and Zimmerman, in the sense that culture engulfs and crisscrosses the magic circle they provide, and the influence thus created have their further resonance in extra game spaces. According to the latter, games are embedded in lifestyle, media, ideologies, histories, and a range of social contexts. This, however, makes games not simply cultural objects. If we take the very basic definition of a multicultural society as seen as a society, a state, a nation, a country, a region, or even simply a bounded geographical location, composed of people who belong to different cultures, including those of minorities and underprivileged groups, then video games may be seen as almost naturally preconditioned to be multicultural. They often constitute and generate delimited internal as well as external spaces of interaction between various nationalities, races, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, religious beliefs, ages, and classes. Video games tend to undo certain boundaries, a matter worth studying as much as lead to encounters. Certainly, with their widespread accessibility, ability to go online, global fandom, worldwide marketing, or the adoption of a distributed production model of software, video games tend to undo certain boundaries, a matter worth studying as much as lead to encounters. Um, Next, there are available more detailed formal definition. Still, once we approach games with multiculturalism in mind, a broad definition turned out to be more workable and revealing. For formalists, definitions are useful in pinpointing qualities that make games stand out against other media. They also help to illuminate the need for a separate field of study or research and more game-specific methodologies. Still, they are unavoidably exclusive, and multiculturalism is often tied to what they discard as not inherent in games. Next is we have, and they defines the discipline of game studies as the study of video games, players, and contexts of both. We have here the two different model, Myra's model, and Bogost model. So Myra is one of the founding fathers of Digital Game Research Association, or DIGRA, defines that uh, the discipline of game studies as the study of video games, players, and context of both. So Myra's major focus is, however, the questions of how video games generate meaning, and in the definition of culture he adopts is that of a system of meaning. Myra distinguishes between the core components of the game, that is, rule and gameplay, as opposed to the shelf features comprising the audio-visual representative semiotic layer. Next is his framework nevertheless introduces a significant hierarchy. Video games are interactive cultural systems, however, with a specific emphasis on meaning-making through playful actions or logoses, as contrast with meaning-making as decoding of message or media representation or semiosis, typical for such cultural systems as television shows or contemporary poetry. And we have here another model by Bogost. One such possible model is advocated by Bogost, who distinguishes between 5 focuses of video game studies. First is the reception and operation, concentrating on user experience. Second is interface. Third one is form and function, including rules, gameplay, and the representative semiotic layer. Fourth, code, and the fifth is the platform. Within this model, investigation takes place on multiple levels, including physical qualities of the game carrier, ideologies represented throughout the story, the question of intellectual property, the historical context the game embodies, and the meaning that is ascribed to it within a given culture. So we have the areas of studies. As Salen and Zimmerman note, games are designed objects that engage culture on several levels. As again, there are many directions that we may take while studying video games from the perspective of multiculturalism. We may take some clues from the design of Salen and Zimmerman. Games are designed objects that engage culture on several levels, a system of representation. They reflect culture, depicting images of gender as well as portrayals of race and class. As already mentioned, representation or reflection is an obvious level to investigate. Next is we have this partly stems from the fact that games are social contexts for cultural learning, and thus they reflect or reproduce ideological values, and partly refers to games' potential to transform their context through conscious and innovative design. And lastly, a game permits player to become a producer in a way that allows them for enhancing cultural diversity or allowing for better identification. So we have here um, another another person named Leigh Afrakir. She is a sociologist and digital game researcher. Keir proposes a threefold model of research into cultural diversity in relation to digital games, based on Dennis McQuail's three categories of diversity. This model advocates the study of diversity of production, diversity of content and representation, diversity of game players. So let's tackle first the diversity of production. Diversity of production, it interests on the publishers, market demands, economic issues, and marketing matters as vital areas for consideration. One needs to attempt to differentiate between where the production is geographically located and where the ownership and control of production and publishing is located. One needs also to separate hardware and software. She also draws our attention to the division of the industry into four basic segments: that of the console market, PC market, MMOGs, and casual minigames. Next is we have diversity of content and representation. She emphasizes the diversity of game genres, looking particularly at the question of genre preferences depending on gender, age, market, or platforms, as well as the role of localization in the flow of genres between different markets. And yet another is that of the representation of linguistic diversity in video games, a matter worthy of investigation taking into consideration. For example, the rise of Asian game development, the issue of representation emerges further in relation to the practice of modding, especially in the context of copyrights, as well as regarding game characters, stories, or gameplays themselves. And lastly, we have the diversity of game players. As far as players are concerned, what calls for attention is a whole array of questions such as culturally conditioned reason for playing and effects of play, demographics of the players and players' preferences, as much as the agenda behind player surveys habits of players, context and constraints of gaming, game culture, and its gendering, player communities, identity information, promotion, and the access to video games. Next is we have a brief insight into the current research. A number of chosen texts available at Niagara's Digital Library and several chapters from the Routledge Companion to Video Game Studies. Both of them are valuable resources which provide an interesting insight into the existing games research dedicated to multiculturalism. Niagara's library, extensive as it is, testify to the fact that diversity as regards video games has diverse meaning, but its multicultural aspect is also pointed to as topical. The same refers to the companion through its status as a comprehensive and educational text, simultaneously draws our attention to certain issues and tensions that may emerge in the process of delimiting a field of knowledge. And lastly, we have its conclusion. From the perspective of multiculturalism, video games constitutes a promising field of inquiry. Simultaneously, they appear to be still much in need of a continuing research. Compelling and complex phenomena as they are, games and their spaces invite multiculturalism as much as they raise issues connected with representation, learning, cultural resistance, the experience and bounds of play and players' agency, the limits imposed on the industry by current politics or economy, as much as by itself and many others, not excluding those related to academic research. Examining them equals better understanding the culture or cultures we live in and by as much as the medium itself. As such, it certainly benefits both multiculturalism and game studies. That would be all, and thank you for listening, and bye.